Welcome to the halls of mediocrity, where legends are forgotten, journeymen are remembered, and serviceable, it's the highest honor that we know. I'm Kevin, this is Jeff, and yes, this hall is named after us. From second-string stats to first-degree charges, this is the halls of mediocrity. Welcome to the very first episode of the halls of mediocrity. If you've listened to our trailer, you got a glimpse of what this is all going to be about. I'm happy to be joined by my brother Jeff. And Jeff, we went back and forth about the subject matter for this first episode. You might remember because we've talked about it. There are so many different people that we could discuss. But I think our feeling was we wanted to settle on something where we had a local connection. So we chose a guy who played 2 years for the Detroit Tigers in the mid-1990s.
Correct.
He's a two-time World Series champion.
Correct.
Jeff, do you want to introduce us to our subject for episode 1?
Not only two-time world champion, not only a Detroit Tiger for 2 years, but also spent 7 years in the Michigan penitentiary system as well. The west side of the state.
Sounds like a classy guy. Who is it we're going to be talking about?
We're talking about the infamous Chad Curtis.
Yes, sir.
He really, and if you take a look, he encapsulates what the halls of mediocrity are going to be all about. Here's a guy. Let's take a look. Take a quick guess, Kev. When was he drafted? He was drafted in 1989. What round was he drafted in?
Well, of course, in baseball, you've got a gazillion rounds.
Yep.
So I think
45th round draft pick.
Yeah, I was going to say something in the 20s or 30s. 45th round. So, folks, do the quick math here. You have, 32 teams? Well, probably not in 89. You probably had 30 teams.
Yeah, I think at that point, you're probably in the 28 to 30 teams.
Okay, so the 45th round, that means there's over 1,000 players are drafted before him.
He was the 1,155th player chosen in the 1989 draft. After a long career at 3 different colleges.
That is nothing short of mediocre.
Never heard of it. Have you heard of it?
What was it called?
It's called, and I know I'm saying it wrong, Yavapai College, Yavapai College? Is that made up?
It's not, Jeff, because if you go back to the mid-1990s, you might remember in WCW, Hulk Hogan was famous for wrestling a Yavapai strap match.
Okay, Yavapai.
So it is real.
Perfect.
Real.
Perfect. And then Cohese College? Have you ever heard of Cohese College?
I don't know of a Cohese strap match. I've never heard of that one.
I've never heard of that. And also, this college, I thought this was like online only, Grand Canyon University. He played at 3 different colleges.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is a real university.
Yeah, Grand Canyon University. He came up in Indiana, but he's originally from Michigan, and from everything I'm reading, he lives in Michigan now. He's still on the west side of the state.
That's quite a stain. That's quite a stain on the mitten state.
Absolutely. But think about it. Halls of mediocrity, right, Kev? That's what we're calling this show, and it's not the Hall of Fame, but guess what? Take a guy like that, the 1,155th player drafted, 45th round, and guess what? He had a pretty decent Major League Baseball career if you just look at the stat.
Yeah, if you look at him statistically, so one of the things that's interesting, he had a 10-year career, which means he's collecting retirement from the MLB.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Collecting retirement. Also, look at it this way. He had a game-winning home run in a World Series game in New York as a New York Yankee.
Yeah, so this is interesting because by every measure, Chad Curtis is run-of-the-mill mediocre on the field. And we'll go into his career in a little bit more detail. But he has some pretty big moments in his career. You mentioned the home run in the World Series. He's a 2-time world champion. He won 2 World Series with the New York Yankees.
Correct. So go back to him in college. And this is what plagued his career, by the way. Or let's go back even before college. Let's go to high school. Played high school baseball. Okay. Standout. Played high school football. Played high school basketball until he got kicked off the team for fighting and having trouble getting along with people, which is before we even get to the after his Major League Baseball career, there's a lot of things we can talk about with Chad Curtis as far as what he did during his career to pretty much piss everyone off.
This is a recurring theme, and you could make the argument that is a precursor of the shenanigans to come.
Absolutely. Go right back. I don't know if you saw it in our days of research we did here. He started with California, right? Started with the Angels. Who was the hitting coach for the California Angels? Hall of Famer Rod Carew.
Yep, Rod Carew.
Let me give you a little inside info on that. So he started in California 92 to 94. Rod Carew, who was the batting instructor, said Curtis was selfish and uncoachable. That was his opinion of Chad Curtis. And of course, why would a 45th round draft pick listen to a hitter like Rod Carew?
Well, not only that, a Hall of Famer Rod Carew, who has a career average over 300, and by all accounts, is one of the easiest going guys that I mean, you hear everybody talk about him. He was never a problem. He was never hard to get along with. But somehow Chad Curtis, the king of West Michigan,
could not get
along with Rod Carew.
And, so what really, and I even told you this as we were coming into this, one of the things that infuriates me as I sat here and read up on Chad Curtis, I knew a little bit about Chad Curtis beforehand, nothing as I got to know the last few days researching it. He claims to be a devout Christian. He claims to be, a what would Jesus do type guy. Talks about the Bible a ton, yet here's a dummy that couldn't get along with anybody.
Yeah, because we all know that scripture where Jesus tells his hitting coach, a Hall of Fame hitting coach, that, well, I'm not going to listen to you.
Exactly. Or he tells the basketball coach, screw you, buddy. I'm going to fight whoever I want to fight. How you like that?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Narcissist might come up. The word narcissist might come up a time or two.
Yeah, and for the sake of clarity, we're not talking Lex Luger. We are talking Chad Curtis.
That's right, the narcissist. Although, maybe they missed that. So anyway, so he leaves California, goes to Detroit, right? Detroit, his first year here, he only played 104 games. I think he might have came over kind of in the middle of the season. 21 home runs, 67 RBIs. Still a young player, right? 96. They traded him at the trade deadline. And they had already made the decision. Had they not been able to move him, they weren't re-signing him.
Yes, and this is, again, a recurring theme with Chad Curtis. In 10 years, he plays on 6 different teams. And there's usually a reason for that.
100%. 1,000%. So he goes from Detroit, goes to LA, really only played 43 games with the Dodgers, becomes a free agent after 96, goes to Cleveland for a year, right? After Cleveland.
Not even. He played 22 games with Cleveland.
22 games with Cleveland. 43 games with the Dodgers. You know what? There must have been some injuries in there, too. He must have had a couple of injuries in there.
Yeah, because there are a couple shortened stints, so probably had some time on the DL. But it's from Cleveland. He ends up in New York.
Correct. And that's where you really get to see the good and the bad of Chad Curtis, right? So again, a mediocre player is great. If you're a Major League Baseball player that can eke out a 10-year career, have a game-winning home run as a New York Yankee in the World Series, you did pretty damn good for yourself, right?
Yes.
But to have
especially
all this
in New York.
toughest place to play, Kev.
And you earn kind of a hero status when you do that. Think of Aaron Boone's another one. Not a great player by anybody's measure, but he has a big home run, a walk-off, and he's a hero forever.
And he's a hero. Look at a guy like Dave Winfield, did nothing but hit and play great in New York, and they couldn't stand him because they couldn't win. Chad Curtis helped them win. They won 2 World Series with him.
Yep, and he was in New York for 2.5 seasons, basically.
Correct. So that's where you start seeing the shine come off of Chad Curtis a little bit, though. So did you look at all about some of the feuds he had?
Yes, so there were a few of them, and a couple of them were notable because they were pretty well publicized, one specifically.
Yeah. Did you get it? So which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about Jim Gray. Is that on your list?
Yes. Well, and that is a phenomenal one to talk about, okay? And again, let's bring up that word, narcissist, right? So Jim Gray, they let Pete Rose come back one time, get announced on the all-time Major League Baseball player, which is another story. I'm a Pete Rose fan, so, I didn't like what Jim Gray did to Pete Rose, to be honest with you, okay? I didn't think that was the time or the place. After his home run that he hits in the World Series, Chad Curtis goes to be interviewed by Jim Gray, and he says, hey, the whole team decided, Jim, we're not talking to you. And he kind of, because of what you did to Pete Rose. And it was kind of like, for me as a fan, I was like, yeah, way to go, Chad Curtis. Way to stand on business. And then as you went and talked to everybody else on the Yankees, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Nobody had any conversations about not talking to Jim Gray about jack shit. Of course we would have talked to Jim Gray. That's all it was. This guy was trying to build his own. Everything he did was about building up his legacy. That's all it was. Building himself up. I'm the cool Christian guy. I'm the guy that should run the clubhouse. I'm the guy that I talk to Jesus every day, which, by the way, I'm all for all of that stuff if you're really doing it and you're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. This is a guy that liked to talk the talk, and honestly, one of the worst human beings we'll probably have on here. So
and bear in mind, we say that, and we haven't even gotten into the crimes.
I know we're not into the bad stuff yet.
So here's another one. I don't know if you saw this one. This is the one that I got a kick out of personally. So after he plays with the Yankees, he goes to Texas, and that's where he finishes out his career. And his feud in Texas is with shortstop Royce Clayton. Yep. Now, Johnny Oates was the manager of the Texas Rangers, and he had a very family-friendly policy, and he encouraged having kids in the locker room. And a lot of the players who had families took advantage of that. Now, Royce Clayton is playing, this is probably the funniest part of this might be the biggest crime in this episode. He's playing Cisco really loud. So I think the most egregious crime in this episode is Royce Clayton's choice of music.
Yeah, exactly.
But I digress. Chad Curtis doesn't like the contents of the music, and frankly, I can understand why, especially if he has kids in there.
Right.
But he chooses to confront Royce, and it becomes a very heated conversation. They get into a little bit of a kerfuffle in the weight room. They didn't come to blows, but it was, I think, probably the last straw for MLB teams. Because in December 1999, somebody in the Yankees organization makes the comment about Chad specifically that Chad just couldn't stay around any longer because his act got tired. And it was this moral superiority. Oh, I'm as good as Jesus and I do all the stuff that Jesus does. And once he became comfortable, he started to become a preacher. And with a lot of the teammates, it ran its course pretty fast. Well, he pulled the same stunt in Texas, has this blow up with Royce Clayton. And I think by that point, he was viewed as a clubhouse liability and nobody wanted to touch him at that point.
Absolutely. And going back to that, Royce Clayton was interviewed right afterwards, and Royce Clayton apologized. He's like, yeah, it was an issue. Now, going back years later, Royce Clayton also said, to be honest, that's the type of thing that happened 20 or 30 times throughout the season. The only difference was there were members of the media there that saw it, and Chad Curtis used that, just like he used the Jim Gray situation, to try and get up on his pedestal and say, hey, I don't believe in that type of music, and I don't believe that should be in the locker room. He used that to try and build up his own credibility as a strong Christian man, which, if you are a strong Christian man, great, Chad, but Jesus was a fisherman of men. You pissed everybody off that came in your way. Come on, Chad. So going back years later, Royce Clayton says it point blank. He's like, look, I didn't mind apologizing. Chad didn't apologize. He took that opportunity to stand on a stack of Bibles.
Yeah. And that seemed to be his modus operandi, as the old saying goes.
Yeah.
So,
go back. He had one more. Him and Jeter had public feuds while he was in New York.
That's a very good point. I did read about that.
So it was in Seattle. There was a bench clearing brawl. I can't remember who got hit, whatever happened. But Curtis was ticked off at a young Derek Jeter at that point because he saw Derek Jeter talking with Alex Rodriguez, who at the time was a Seattle Mariner, and kind of laughing and chuckling. And he made a point to go to the media to tell the media how ticked off he was. And, that's not. And again, he tried to use Derek Jeter's fame to build up his own self-promotion. Again, I'm the holier-than-thou hero, right? And Derek Jeter, to his credit, handled it like a professional. Didn't say a word. And then a couple of years later said, hey, I didn't get along with Chad Curtis, but guess what? Nobody got along with Chad Curtis.
Yeah. And so he wraps up his career 2001 in Texas. And this is where it gets into more of the uglier side of Chad Curtis. And before we jump into it, I'm going to preface this by saying that the details of some of what Chad Curtis does or did is a matter of public record. It's been written about in news articles, but we're not going to get into the sordid details involved because it involved underage girls. So I want to be crystal clear about that, but we will tell you from a 10,000-foot view what Chad was doing that earned him his spot in the halls of mediocrity. Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to wrap up on Chad's career?
Well, so a couple things, and this one is more of just a trivia thing. So Royce Clayton, which, I remember Royce Clayton from collecting baseball cards. Do you know what his post-career claim to fame is?
He was in a movie for Cisco.
Not for eBaying off his Cisco CD that him and Chad Curtis almost came to blows over. He was in a movie.
I do not know.
The movie was Moneyball. Do you know who he played in the movie Moneyball?
In Moneyball?
Yeah.
I don't know.
He played Miguel Tejada. So if you go back and watch Moneyball, Miguel Tejada is played by Royce Clayton. I did not know this.
No, that's interesting you say that because that was the one thought I had, being he was a shortstop. But I guess that doesn't surprise me. Now, the real question is Miguel Tejada a Cisco fan?
Maybe. That's for another episode. Number 2. This is
that's a crime for sure.
Yeah, that's another episode for sure. So number 2, second point, going career-wise. So Chad Curtis, I'm going to tip my cap from the athletic standpoint. Okay? 45th round draft pick, 1155th player, 10-year career. He was a pretty decent player and a mediocre player. But guess what? That's great for a 45th round draft pick. There are not very many 45th round draft picks that made Major League Baseball, much less played. So I'll give you a little bit there, Chad Curtis, but you destroyed yourself before you ended your career because you are such a narcissist and you are such a fake Christian that it was disgusting. And you probably blew millions of dollars. And part of this for me is I like to learn things, right? When I watch sports, I want to take something away from it. I want to take away, hey, hard work pays off. Hey, let's be smart here. Hey, to me, athletics is a great learning experience if you really take it in, if you take it all in. The thing I learned from his career is hard work will pay off, but your brain better follow a little bit. Your brain better follow a little bit. And this guy is obviously an idiot. So I'll leave the career at that. So, but can I throw one more thing at you?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
It depends.
Okay, one more thing at you real quick. Did I ever tell you I met Chad Curtis's dad?
No, I did not know this.
In his career, his first trip as a California Angel to Tiger Stadium with our buddy Marv, who loved to collect autographs. So he'd always bully his way up. And
God
we're sitting there watching the Angels. And an older gentleman, and by the way, look, he was a high school teacher, which I remember him telling us he was a teacher at the time. Nicest guy in the world, proud as could be. That's my son right there, waving at him. Chad Curtis way back at him. Nice guy. So, as you talk about that, you don't know what goes wrong, but that poor guy, he was a nice guy. So wherever you are, Mr. Curtis, I'm sorry your son turned out to be such a douchebag. That's it.
So to put a bow on Chad's career and really emphasize just how mediocre he was, I'm on Baseball Reference, and one of my favorite things to do is look at similarity scores. So if you want to put Chad Curtis into perspective, what his career looked like, here's some of the players that he is most similar to. Glenn Wilson, Dan Gladden, another former Detroit Tiger.
Glenn Wilson, also a former
If that
Tiger.
doesn't spell mediocrity, if that doesn't spell mediocrity, I don't know what does.
Mediocre.
Yeah,
but let's be honest, what we're going to talk about, he does not even qualify for the Hall of Mediocrity. He qualifies for the Hall of Pieces of Shit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. But let's just see just how, is he in the East Wing in the Hall of Pieces of Shit, or is he in the West Wing? Because I got it all right here, my friends.
Oh boy, here we go.
So Chad Curtis retires in 2001. And upon his retirement, he returns to West Michigan, Berry County, Michigan, and he begins volunteering at Lakewood High School in Lake Odessa, working as a weight room strength trainer. Hey, he was a world-class athlete. What better person to have work in the weight room for you, for your athletics program, than a guy like Chad Curtis? But there's a little bit of an issue here, because it gave him direct, unsupervised access to student athletes. And that can go one of two ways: really, really good, or not so good. And I think we know where this is going. According to prosecutors, Chad abused multiple students between 2011 and 2012, including 4 girls between the ages of 13 and 16. This is some of the most disturbing stuff you're ever going to hear or read about. And this is what Chad chose to do in his retirement. So a 16-year-old stated that he straddled her on a training bench under the guise of massaging her.
By the way,
a 15-year-old,
not a massage therapist.
Yeah. Should we forget that? He is not a massage therapist.
But he plays one on TV in his warped mind.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, or at least an unsupervised one in the Lakewood Public Schools. Then a 15-year-old stated that Curtis touched her in her private areas under the pretext of rehabilitating a knee.
Rehabilitating a knee.
I'm not a scientist. I'm not an anatomist. But I know where knees are, and I know it's not in that general area.
And he had no business being around.
In May of 2012. Had no business whatsoever. In May of 2012, after several female students came forward with these accusations of inappropriate touching, he resigned his position at Lakewood Public Schools. So, not long after that, that's when the criminal charges come up for Chad. So he was arraigned in Berry County District Court on 5 counts, 5 times, of criminal sexual conduct. He was released after posting a $25,000 cash on a $250,000 bond. In August of 2012, a 6th count was added because, 5 Apparently wasn't enough. He needed an extra one. And at that point, once it became 6 accusers, he faced a potential sentence of 15 years. He goes to trial in August of 2013, and 3 of his victims testified. Now, it is public record, but as I said, I'm not going to share specifics and details because these were underage kids, and they don't need to have that aired anymore. 3 of his victims testified, as did 2 additional accusers, all underage. Now, in his trial, Curtis declined to testify in his own defense. And not surprisingly, the jury convicted him on all 6 counts of criminal sexual conduct. So you move ahead another 60 days. We're in October of 2013. He is sentenced by Berry County Circuit Court Judge Amy McDowell in Hastings, Michigan. At sentencing, Curtis, going back to the narcissist, it's really important to wrap your head around this when you hear this part. Curtis was given the opportunity to address the court. Now, you would think there would be, especially a man of God, as Chad professed himself to be, there would be some contrition and a desire to apologize for what he did. What do you think he did? What every narcissist does. He used it to blame his victims, testify to his Christian faith, which is a complete farce, and suggest he and one victim could write a book together that would have a positive impact on a lot of people. He maintained that the 3 victims had lied. One of the victims also spoke and directly contradicted the stupidity he spewed in his statement, stating that Curtis was a manipulator who knew exactly what he had done as he was doing it. Now, Judge McDowell's verdict on his character was pretty crystal clear. You certainly are a threat to any community you get into. And boy, truer words could not have been spoken. Kudos to Judge McDowell. McDowell called Curtis a predator from the bench. Gee, I wonder why. Berry County prosecutor Julie Pratt went further after the hearing. That was the most selfish, self-serving, victim-blaming statement I've heard in my entire career as a prosecutor. It speaks volumes about his character or lack thereof. Now, I would just like to state for the record, that was a very diplomatic way of describing what Curtis did. What he actually did is one of the most self-serving, narcissistic, abhorrent things that you could possibly imagine. Remember, these were underage girls, and he proceeds to blame them while at the same time professing his fake faith. What a scumbag. Now, while Curtis was in prison, there was a separate and very extensive civil legal battle that unfolded as well. In 2017, all 4 women filed a federal civil lawsuit against both Curtis and the Lakewood Public Schools, arguing that the institution failed to protect them. All of them settled with Lakewood Public Schools and its Board of Education for $575,000. When you're talking about crimes against children, that is a pittance for the damage that someone like Chad Curtis does. The school paid for giving Curtis unsupervised access to minor athletes. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Then, later in 2017, one victim's case against Curtis himself went to trial in a federal court, and a judge ordered Curtis to pay that victim $1.8 million in damages, a judgment he immediately began working to evade. Well, who could have called that? Right out of the O.J. Simpson playbook.
Kev, he's a
And
Christian.
here's another one he took out. Oh, I forgot. Here's another thing he took out of O.J.'s playbook. In May 2018, a federal lawsuit was filed alleging that Curtis and his ex-wife, Candace, had conspired to transfer his money and assets out of his name, specifically to avoid court-ordered payouts to the victims. Boy, haven't we heard that one before. This is a guy that refuses to take any responsibility for any of his devious, immoral, rotten, horrible actions against the most vulnerable people in society, kids. And oh, by the way, he blamed them for it. Attorney Monica Beck stated during that federal trial for his hiding assets, that they transferred money, vehicles, houses, and disposed and liquidated a lot of their assets, which they then tried to hide from the state of Michigan and tried to hide from the client. One of the recorded statements that Beck made was related to something Candace, his wife, had said. I'm trying to keep things out of the victim's hands. A direct quote. So this was not just him. His wife was playing along, trying to avoid having to pay restitution to his victims. What a couple. Then in January of 2019, what do you expect is going to happen next? He tries not to pay. He tries to hide assets. What could possibly be coming next? If you said bankruptcy, ding, 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 ding. Candace Curtis filed for bankruptcy. On the same day, a judge ruled she could be added as a defendant in the lawsuits against her ex-husband. The bankruptcy filing was denied, as it should have been. The judge's written ruling was very clear. Candace was simply attempting to forestall, if not escape, the post-judgment collection proceedings in district court. And her testimony was indicative of her lack of good faith. Well, my interpretation is any faith that these two had was lacking right across the board. All of his Bible thumping in the clubhouse, all of his claims of moral superiority were clearly a farce, and it even went so far as to how he handled himself after being convicted and found liable for molesting underage girls. Now, Curtis was released from prison. He did serve his time. He was released September 22nd of 2020, so about 6 months after COVID. He served exactly the minimum of his 7 to 15-year sentence. At the time, he's 52 years old. He was placed on a supervised parole for 2 years and returned to the Metro Grand Rapids area. Now, a WOOD TV reporter went to his home after his release, and the exchange was brief, and I was able to jot this down. He was asked if he had any message for his victims. No, not at this point. Asked what his plans were. I'm going to try to be a productive person, thanks. It would have been nice if he had tried to be a productive person about 10, 12 years before that. Instead, he chose degeneracy.
Incredible.
So the thing about this story is he epitomizes what the halls of mediocrity is all about. A 45th round draft pick in the Major League Baseball draft in 1989, a 10-year career, which is probably far better than most 45th round draft picks will ever experience, but statistically nowhere near a superstar. Hints of problems in the clubhouse and interactions with his teammates, largely due to this facade that he put up of how faithful and good and righteous he was. And then post-career, the veneer was off, and we saw what Chad Curtis really was. He was a monumental piece of garbage. He was a assaulter of underage kids, girls, who he was there to train and help make them better athletes, and he took full advantage of it. He is the first inductee into the halls of mediocrity, and he is a monumental piece of trash. Jeff, what do you think?
He is absolute garbage. So I want to go back a few, and you hit on everything there, Kev. And I didn't know about the TV station running him down. I would love to know where this piece of garbage is right now, to be honest with you. But I want to go back before he even started at those high schools. Did you read up on the section where he was actually working at a Christian high school for 3 years and they terminated him?
Yes, I do remember that.
And the reason why they terminated him was the same reason he couldn't stick with a baseball team for more than 2 years. He couldn't get along with anybody. And if you want to hear just a great story about what an imbecile this guy is, a lot of the reason, and nobody would officially say why he was terminated, but the rumors are he didn't think at the Christian high school they were enforcing rules enough on dress code for women. Can you believe? And then he leaves, he gets terminated. He didn't leave, he got terminated. And then he goes, and this is what follows. I read an article talking about the detectives, and the detectives talked to Chad about what was happening. And, they said he was very quick to say things along the lines of, well, I'm not saying the girls are lying, and I'm not saying the girls are liars, but I'm not a liar either. And they brought one piece of evidence out. And by the way, for everybody listening, this is how you know somebody is a piece of garbage and a liar. They brought out a piece of evidence and asked him about that specific piece of evidence. And guess what happened, Kev? I gotta go lay down. My stomach hurts. This is all too much for me, Chad. He had to go lay down for an hour because everything at that moment just became so overwhelming for him. Absolute narcissist. Last thing, and this one I found to be amusing because during his 55-minute tirade, he talked about how he was there to help the student athletes and make the student athletes better. And some of the boys got interviewed and they said, at first we thought it was cool. It's like, hey, here's a major league player and he's going to come in and help us train. And they said, we found out pretty quick he didn't give two rips about any of us guys. He went right to the girls and started training the girls. Absolute predator. Last thing I'll say, and this is what bothered me more than anything, when these charges first came to light and these accusations first came out, there were a lot of people sticking up for him. And it's disgusting. And he's disgusting. As a society, we have to learn that some people can talk the talk, right? They can Bible thump, they can give us verses. And by the way, I'm all for reading the Bible. I'm all for praying. I pray daily. But you have to be able to spot those wolves in sheep's clothing. And this guy, more than most that we're even going to do these shows on, was nothing more than a wolf in sheep's clothing at that high school. But really, we should have been able to go back and look at that career and see that he was going to be a problem right away. It's very sad. It's very sad because he really had all the makings of a really great story, and he's just a terrible human being. And terrible human beings will make terrible decisions. So he's got a well-deserved spot in the Hall of Mediocrity. Again, I'd like to rename a wing Hall of Garbage, and I would like to make him the first inductee of that wing of the Hall of Mediocrity.
I got a feeling after about 6 or 7 episodes, the lid on that trash can is going to be overflowing.
Absolutely. It's such a disheartening thing to see, right? You got guys that play sports, and I love a comeback story. I love the underdog. I love the guy that works his butt off and make something of himself, not just in athletics, in life in general. I love the person that can pick themselves up off the ground and make something of themselves. And he had that story, but he was such a narcissist. And he was so self-centered. And you can't have that in sports. And you know what? Take a look. We talked about Rod Carew, Hall of Famer. Guess what? He was a good teammate. He was a good coach. And he positively impacted a lot of people's lives.
Yep.
And he knew right away, this guy is uncoachable. We should have listened to Rod Carew.
Yeah, and generally speaking, when a
boat.
guy is, and one thing about that statement too is most athletes who are uncoachable, it's usually a product of underlying issues. And I would go out on a limb and say that a lot of the subjects that we will cover on this show will have been deemed uncoachable at some point and turn out to be some of the most narcissistic, self-absorbed pieces of trash you will ever see. People should have heeded the words of Rod Carew. By all accounts, not just a Hall of Fame player, but a Hall of Fame person.
Absolutely.
So, folks, episode 1, Chad Curtis is in the books. And it was quite a tale. It was very disturbing. Yeah, Chad, take a hike, pal. I hope he is balled up in some hole somewhere where he can't do any damage to anybody else. I hope he lives a miserable life and is a pariah for the rest of it. Because when you do things against kids, that's where the line is crossed and you can never go back. And that's what he did. He was a serial predator against underage kids.
And, even on top of that, shame on the justice system a little bit. That guy should still be rotting in jail. That guy has no business being out in society. And quite honestly, I hope those victims are doing well. And they should be proud of themselves for stepping up and reporting this piece of garbage. Because I guarantee they saved other girls.
You can guarantee it. Because remember, he was in his early 50s. So he could have done this for another 15, 20 years if he had wanted to and if he had been given the opportunity. So I think there's a lesson to be learned. One, if you're a kid and you're in a similar situation, you need to say something because You need to protect yourself and you need to protect others. Step up and do it because you cannot allow people like this to take control of your life and do the damage that they've done.
Absolutely.
Heck of a story, Jeff. We've got a laundry list of names that we will be covering on this podcast. And I can assure you, this is a pretty unique one, pretty rare, I think, in terms of depravity. Some of them I think are going to be a little more humorous, just dumb athletes being dumb athletes. You'll probably get some chuckles out of that. But I don't know that we could have picked a first subject better than Chad Curtis because he really is the epitome of this show, the Halls of Mediocrity.
Yep. This one was a heavy one. Once you really got in and read up on it, this one was a heavy one.
Yeah, it sure was. But we hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be releasing on a weekly basis. This is something exciting. It's a little bit different. Those of you who know me from my Midnight Mystery Archive, this is a far cry from what I do over there. It's still true crime, but it's a little bit different. I don't script this, but I hope you're going to continue to listen along. Come along with us as we induct more members into the Halls of Mediocrity. Jeff, say goodbye.
Love y'all. See you next week. Halls of Mediocrity. Who's next?
We'll see you next week from the Halls of Mediocrity.